The walls of the Forrester estate had seen countless storms of passion, betrayal, and heartbreak over the decades. But nothing prepared the family for the devastating truth that would shake the foundations of the bold and the beautiful. What began as yet another round of romantic upheaval between Ridge Forrester, Taylor Hayes, and Brooke Logan spiraled into something far darker and more final than any triangle could ever deliver. Ridge had made a choice not just about love, but about life itself. It all began with what was supposed to be a moment of joy. After months of reconciliation, Ridge and Taylor were set to remarry in a grand ceremony meant to seal their long history of love, loss, and second chances. Taylor had believed with every fiber of her being that this was their destiny, that after years of heartbreak caused by Brooke's endless intrusions, she was finally the one Ridge was ready to commit to. The children, Steffi and Thomas, were elated at the prospect of seeing their parents reunited, and the family rallied around them. But just as vows were about to be exchanged, Ridge pulled back. He couldn't do it. The look on Taylor's face shifted from joy to disbelief to a rage fueled by years of disappointment. Taylor confronted Ridge on the spot, demanding answers. She accused him of once again letting Brooke dangle in the shadows of his heart, ready to swoop in the moment Taylor faltered. Her voice trembled with fury, her hands shook, and her heartbreak spilled into bitter accusations. "How many times will you humiliate me, Ridge? How many times will you make me believe I'm enough, only to run back to her?" Brooke, meanwhile, stood silent, torn between guilt and opportunity. She hadn't pushed Ridge into this. She hadn't orchestrated Taylor's heartbreak this time. Yet, as Ridge faltered, Brooke knew destiny had opened a door once more. She was the one he always returned to, and maybe this was her chance again. But the fallout was immediate. Thomas, ever protective of his mother and still carrying a long-standing resentment toward Brooke, lashed out. He stormed across the room, shouting that his mother deserved better than Ridge's cowardice. He called Brooke a manipulator, a homewrecker, and vowed that she would not destroy Taylor's happiness again. His anger wasn't just words, it was visceral, threatening, and dangerous. He accused Ridge of being weak, of stringing along both women for his own ego, and declared he would never forgive him for humiliating Taylor yet again. The fight escalated, family members pulled between sides, voices rose, and accusations flew like daggers. But then Ridge stopped everything. The room went silent when he raised his voice not in anger, but in a tone heavy with finality. He told them all to stop fighting because the truth had nothing to do with Brooke or Taylor. His hands shook, his eyes glistened, and in that moment, Ridge revealed the devastating secret he had been hiding. He had been diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. The disease had progressed silently, and by the time he found out, it was already in its final stage. There was no cure, only time and very little of it left. The room froze. Taylor's anger collapsed into shock, her body trembling as the weight of his words sank in. Brooke gasped, tears streaming down her face as she realized this wasn't about choice or indecision. This was about mortality. Thomas, who only moments before had been seething with rage, fell into stunned silence, his fury dissolving into horror. Ridge explained his decision to cancel the wedding. It wasn't because he didn't love Taylor. It wasn't because Brooke had somehow reclaimed his heart. It was because he couldn't ask Taylor and Ionetto carry this burden with him. He couldn't stand the thought of tying Taylor to a future filled with suffering and loss. He wanted to spare her the pain of watching him wither away. "I love you, Taylor," he said, voice cracking. "But I can't do this to you. I won't trap you in my illness." Taylor collapsed into tears, begging him not to push her away. She insisted she wanted to be there, to fight alongside him, to love him until the end, no matter how short their time might be. But Ridge stood firm. His decision was final. The wedding was over. Brooke, though shattered by the revelation, couldn't help but see the cruel twist of fate. For years, she had battled Taylor for Ridge's heart. She had believed destiny always pulled them back together. And now, when she stood once again at the precipice of reclaiming her great love, destiny had robbed her. Ridge made it clear to Brooke, to Taylor, and to everyone, he would not return to Brooke either. He was not choosing one woman over the other. He was choosing to walk this path alone, even if it meant breaking both of their hearts. Eric Forrester, already reeling from his own health crises and frailty, tried to intervene. He urged Ridge not to shut out those who loved him, not to face this disease alone. Eric reminded him that family was meant to stand together in times of pain, that Brooke and Taylor were not just women in his love life, but pillars of his history. Ridge, however, refused to bend. He told Eric that he had made peace with his fate, and he would not let love turn into pity or obligation. The fallout was catastrophic. Taylor withdrew into grief and bitterness, lashing out at Brooke, even though deep down she knew Brooke wasn't to blame this time. She accused Brooke of secretly reveling in Ridge's suffering, of always standing by waiting for her pain. Brooke, equally shattered, tried to comfort Taylor, but Thomas intervened with venom. He told Brooke she was never to come near his mother again, that if she dared exploit Ridge's illness to win him back, he would destroy her. Steffi, caught between loyalty to her mother and love for her father, tried to keep the family from tearing apart completely, but the fractures only deepened. Hope tried to be there for Brooke, but even she struggled to understand the devastation Ridge's illness had unleashed. In the weeks that followed, Ridge began to put his affairs in order. He spent quiet days with his children, moments of reflection with his father, and long, painful conversations with both Brooke and Taylor. He asked them both to forgive him not for choosing one over the other, but for leaving them behind too soon. He wanted them to live their lives fully, to find happiness again, even if it was without him. Taylor, despite her heartbreak, promised him she would never stop loving him. Brooke, in tears, told him that even in death, he would always be her destiny. And Ridge, caught between the two greatest loves of his life, realized that in the end, the choice was never about which woman he loved more. It was about letting them go. The Forrester family rallied, but the war between Thomas and Brooke intensified. Thomas blamed her for every ounce of pain his mother endured and vowed that once Ridge was gone, he would never allow Brooke near their family again. The battle lines were drawn, ensuring that Ridge's illness would not end the Forrester-Logan feud, but ignite it to even greater fury. And yet, as Ridge faced the inevitable, he carried himself with dignity. He refused to let the disease define him, even as it consumed him. He would not marry Taylor, he would not return to Brooke, and he would not let pity dictate his final days. Ridge Forrester, designer, lover, father, and son, chose to face his end on his own terms. In a world defined by scandal, betrayal, and love triangles, the bold and the beautiful delivered a twist not of passion, but of mortality. For the first time, love could not conquer fate. And as Ridge's final chapter began, the family was left to grapple not just with grief, but with the legacy of a man whose choices in life and love would haunt them long after he was gone. Lee draws the line with a surgeon's precision and a mother's blunt pain. She severs ties with Poppy and declares that Luna will not be allowed to keep setting fires that others have to put out. It is not a tantrum or a temporary flare of temper. It is a cold boundary forged by years of cleaning up messes and watching consequences balloon. Lee has always believed in triage stop the bleeding first, debate the philosophy latter, and in her view Luna's pattern of impulsive choices has left too many people bruised. Too many rooms full of whispers and fallout. She refuses to let her son, her reputation, or the hospital become collateral damage again. That bell lands like a gavel strike, final, public, and costly. Yet every boundary invites pressure, and pressure arrives at the worst moment. Poppy's world, already fragile from Lee's rejection, lurches toward a new tragedy that refuses to stay in the corner. It doesn't just hover over mother and daughter. It reaches outward like a rip current, pulling in Bill and Finn to men who know how to fight but not always how to surrender. Poppy, who has often survived by charm and improvisation, now faces a crisis that cannot be charmed away. The stakes are flesh and blood real. A catastrophic mistake, a medical emergency, a chain of decisions that start small and end in sirens. Bill steps forward with the instinct of a savior who believes protection and possession are the same thing. Finn steps forward with the oath of a physician, torn between compassion and protocol, the son who wants to fix everything, and the doctor who must accept that some fixes come with a price. The hospital becomes the crucible. In that white bright glare of corridors and monitors, in the controlled chaos that is Finn's domain and Lee's fortress, the shock no one saw coming lands. It lands hard enough to make Bill feel the floor tilt. One wrong call, one delayed signature, one refusal to bend a rule becomes the spark that threatens to set his entire life on fire, from the image he guards so carefully to the fragile hope of a new starting point with Poppy, to any future where Luna is a bridge instead of a barricade. Bill has survived corporate warfare, ugly divorces, and to many nights pacing a penthouse with the city lights as his only witness. But this is different. This is a hospital, a life or death ledger where money has less power and time refuses to negotiate. Here, he is not the man with the pen that signs destines. He is the man waiting outside a door with his heart in his throat, realizing that love can't be controlled like a balance sheet. He looks for someone to blame because blame feels like action. He can scream at a policy, he can glare at a doctor, he can promise to rewrite the rules with a lawyer's letterhead, but none of that stops a countdown once it starts. And Lee, uncompromising and unshakable, becomes the lightning rod. She made the hard choices, she enforced the protocol. She pulled the plug on sentiment. In a crisis, those choices save lives. In a family, those choices draw heat like a magnet. Lee knows it. She accepts the cost even as the accusations rise like steam from a broken pipe. Finn hears them too, echoing against the tile. Why didn't you bend? Why didn't you make an exception? Why didn't you protect them the way you protect the rules? He knows the answers. He also knows the answers won't soothe a man who thinks he's about to lose everything. The fight moves in circles, but always returns to the same center, Luna. Lee's original ultimatum was surgical: contain the damage, stop the pattern. But the crisis rips open all the quiet questions that have been building around Luna's wake. How many times is one person allowed to say, "I didn't mean for this to happen," before it stops sounding like an apology and starts sounding like a plan with blind spots? How do you measure intent against impact when the impact keeps knocking people to the floor? Luna's defenders point to her youth, her heart, her ability to feel shame and try again. Her critics point to the rubble and say the map is clear enough, but intentions are still capable of burning down a house. Poppy hears both sides and hears none of them. It's her daughter. The word itself is an argument. Daughter? That is the drumbeat beneath her panic and her pride. Poppy has spent years improvising a life where the rent gets paid and the lights stay on and the door stays open just enough for hope to slip through. Now she stands in a hallway where improvisation fails and procedure rules. She needs mercy, leverage, a short cute anything to keep Luna from being swallowed by the consequences that Lee insists must finally land. So Poppy reaches for Bill, because Bill is power and speed and decisive action. She also leans toward Finn, because Finn is medicine and steadiness and the one person who can translate the jargon into a second chance. In doing so, she pulls them into a spiral of guilt and anger. Guilt for what they failed to anticipate, anger at each other for not stopping the inevitable. Bill wants to bulldoze obstacles. Finn wants to follow the path that keeps any future patient safe. Poppy wants a miracle that looks like an exception with no cost. Lee wants order restored before another casualty shows up with a wristband. The collision is total. Visitation doors swing, machine alarms chirp, and every word feels like it comes with a warning label. Bill's fear wears the mask of control. He strides in, demands clarity, lists resources, promises everything. But beneath the bravado is a man confronting the only currency that matters now: time on a monitor, a number on a chart, the unflinching voice of a surgeon saying yes or no. If the hospital's shock is an outcome tied to Lunan overdose, an accident, a complication, Bill knows the press will feast, enemies will circle, and his own faith in Poppy will face a hammer test. He can lose the story he's been trying to write about himself, the redemption arc he burns to prove. And if the shock implicates his decision, say he pushed, he paid, he circumvented something that shouldn't have been circumvented, and the cost spreads. He risks not just headlines but the quiet verdicts that land in private, from sons who look at him differently, from partners who see a pattern he swore he'd broken. Finn's fear wears the mask of duty. He knows what can be done, what must be signed, what cannot be risked. He knows how a judgment call at 2 a.m. can blow back at 2 p.m. With lawsuits, board reviews, and a mother who expects excellence without exception. Finn's heart is good, but his training is strict, and that training was sharpened by Lee's relentless standards. So when Poppy pleads and Bill threatens, and the corridor becomes a courtroom, Finn stands with the chart in his hand and the conflict in his chest. The son who wants to ease his mother's burden versus the man who refuses to let medicine become a popularity contest. He refuses to falsify, to shortcut, to let a personal connection slip into the sterile field. Yet even as he holds the line, guilt slides in, guilt of a healer watching pain and knowing the rules sometimes look cruel to the people who need them broken. Lee's fear wears no mask at all. She states the facts. She explains the protocols. She accepts the booze. She has been here before, the woman who gets called heartless because she will not let chaos set the schedule. She believes chaos has had the microphone long enough. That belief makes her effective, and it makes her a target. So when the blame starts, she does not flinch. She is the grimmest kind of comfort, the person who will tell you no while the rest of the room whispers maybe. She will own the decision because someone has to. And still, there is a moment maybe only Finn sees it when Lee's eyes show the smallest crack, the private toll of being the spine when everyone else would rather be the heart. The shock in the hospital becomes a prism, splitting everyone's colors. For Bill, it shows the limits of muscle. For Poppy, it shows the cost of improvisation bill coming due with interest. For Luna, it shows the unavoidable math of cause and effect. For Finn, it shows the weight of leadership that no one can carry for him. For Lee, it shows that control cuts both ways. It prevents disaster, and it invites loneliness. As news travels from station to station, as the first wave of panic gives way to the procedural grind, the city beyond the hospital windows keeps moving. Inside, time thickens. Bill paces and imagines outcomes, the press conference where he puts a brave face on loss. The late-night call where he begs forgiveness he cannot buy. The quiet resolution to never let himself care this much again because caring feels like walking into a room full of knives. He is at risk of becoming a man who loses everything because losing once this deeply can trigger a run in patience, on trust, on connection. He can fire, sell, withdraw, isolate, declare war on every reminder of vulnerability. That is the trap that waits for him. Turn pain into policy and live alone in a mob of admirers. Finn does rounds while living in two worlds, doctor to the unit, son to the woman who set the unit's standards. He keeps his notes clean, his orders precise, his answers calm. But he knows that one more demand from Bill, one more plea from Poppy, one more tremor in Luna's condition or consequence could force a decision that leaves a scar. He can't be two people at once. He must be the doctor. And being the doctor may mean letting someone hate him so that the system doesn't break for the next patient who will never know his name. Poppy waits with a mix of anger and heartbreak that only a mother recognizes. Her mind toured the past in cruel detail. The time she looked the other way, the time she promised tomorrow would be safer, the time she trusted luck to behave. She resents Lee for being right in the least helpful way. She resents herself for giving fate so many open windows. She resents a world where love doesn't automatically translate into protection. But under the resentment is a vow that matches Lee's in intensity if not in method. She will not let Luna drown. She will beg, barter, confess, burn bridge whatever it takes. That vow draws Bill closer because Bill understands vows made in the heat of a siege. It also pushes Lee further because Lee understands that panic writes bad policy. Luna is the eye of the storm, and whether she is conscious on a gurney or facing a tribunal of consequences in the aftermath, she has to meet the truth that intention is not a shield. She has to own the pattern that led here and choose whether she will let other people mop up her stories forever. She may have been led astray. She may have been manipulated. She may have been unlucky. All of that can be true and still leave her with a simple task: change the inputs. If she wants forgiveness that sticks, she has to stop asking others to carry the breakage. That is the only apology that matters now. Through it all, Lee remains the contested center. The hospital staff respects her. The family circle resents her. The city will judge her depending on the headline. She is blamed for what she refused to authorize, for the door she did not open, for the exception she would not grant. Yet if the outcome at the end of the shock is stability rather than catastrophe, the same voices will go quiet, and quiet is the currency of success in her world. The tragedy that threatened to devour everything will become the lesson no one wanted to learn. And if the outcome is grief, the blame will stick because grief always wants a face to point at. Lee will endure that too. She is built to absorb heat and keep moving. But even still fatigues. The question is whether anyone in this constellation will notice that the system they love to hate is the system that carried them through the worst day. The day will end, the chart will close, and people will step into the night with their verdicts. Bill will decide whether loss will turn him into a fortress or a father. Poppy will decide whether love means softening the truth or sharpening it. Finn will decide whether being the son requires him to apologize for being the doctor. Luna will decide whether repentance is a speech or a strategy. Lee, who started the day by cutting ties and drawing hard lines, will decide whether to make one more hard choice, to keep the boundary in place until the pattern breaks for good. Even if it means being the villain in a story where she is trying to save everyone from the sequel. That is the drama at the heart of this chapter: a family, a hospital, and a crisis that refuses to be polite. There are no grand speeches that fix it, no loopholes that erase the cost. There are only people making choices under pressure, and the consequences that snap into place when the pressure lifts. Lee's hardness is not a flaw but a stance. Poppy's plea is not a weakness but a mother's engine. Bill's fury is not just noise, it's the sound a life makes when it hits a wall. Finn's calm is not emptiness, it is courage measured in milligrams. And we're not no longer allowed to be a storm that passes without paying stands where growth starts, in the shadow of a shock that can either define her or refine her. If there is a way forward, it starts with the hardest sentence in any language: this cannot happen again. Whether the players accept that sentence will decide who heals and who keeps bleeding. The hospital lights dim in stages. The echo of footsteps fades. But the choices made in those corridors will travel, shaping dinners, boardrooms, headlines, apologies, and the next time a boundary is tested. In that sense, the shock was never just a single event. It was a mirror. And when the mirror stops shaking, everyone will finally see what they brought into the room and what they are willing to carry out.